Good evening, everyone. We've got 2 days left to the world record final deadline. And today I've got Andrew Winston, who is the world's leading voice, I would say, and as well expert and a thought leader on sustainability. And actually, Andrew Winston, without you knowing, you actually, together with Paul Polman, encouraged me to do this world record once I read your book. So welcome on the board, Andrew.
Thank you. I'm excited it inspired you and that you're doing something fun with it. It's good to see.
Wonderful. And I have the first question that kind of came to me today. It was, I really wanted to understand when maybe in your lifetime you got this moment or event that you remember that, okay, I'm gonna now do something with sustainability and
Mm,
I will tap into this endeavor. Could you take us back to that moment and let us know, like, how did that emerged?
yeah. Well, I mean, now it's more than 20 years ago, which is kind of shocking to me. For a long time, I felt I was like new in the field. So I had spent the first part of my career working. I was at consulting at Boston Consulting Group. I was at big media companies, and I was doing normal jobs, strategy, marketing, those kinds of things. But kind of personally, was increasingly getting concerned about the environment, and I became a vegetarian. I was changing light bulbs in the apartment. I was doing all these things, and just had this feeling that there had to be more I could do than just individual action, and there must be some way to bring my business background in. And so at the time, in 2000, I was at a dot com. And for those of us listening who are old enough to remember the dot com crash, the company I worked for went under, and I was all of a sudden kind of free, frankly, and was thinking about going back to big companies strategy jobs, and realized I didn't want to, and started asking around and talking to people about business and the world, and heard this word sustainability. And I read a few books at the time, long before I thought I'd write any of my own. It was just the books that were out that were about, and there weren't many at the time, that were about, how business affects the world. And some of the kind of CEOs like Ray Anderson at Interface Flooring, who had this awakening. And I read a few books, and over those few weeks, I just realized, this was the right path. That the path the world was on was not sustainable. It really couldn't continue forever, and that I needed to try to bring my business background to bear. So, I went back to school, wrote a book, and it just kind of built from there. And I've just always believed that business has this huge role to play, but we have to recognize that the system can't continue the way we're doing it. We can't go infinitely on a finite planet. It's impossible. So the opportunities now are amazing, so much more than when I got into this 20 years ago. A lot of it was theoretical. Now it's happening, and it's exciting now. Things are really moving.
So, as I understand, it was a pause in your life,
Yeah.
as you speak, right? When it kind of came to you that you want to do something completely different. And when I speak to many CEOs, everyone says normally that it's the space when they have the moment for themselves and the solitude when everything comes
Yeah.
down. They start listening to that inner innate kind of
Yeah.
intelligence and something beyond what we understood in a linear mechanical world. Andrew, what are you aware of today that you were, for example, not aware of 20
Mm.
years ago, and how that awareness kind of shifted you and
Mm.
changed you, maybe?
Well, I mean, if you kind of boil it down to that, what's the one moment where you think, oh, I got to do this? There's really a big aha or big kind of awareness moment in sustainability. And it seems so obvious in retrospect, looking back, but it's this idea that, that the business world is actually within society, within the planet, not the other way around. We're taught that it's kind of the economy and business above all, and then environment or resources or social stuff is kind of this niche. It's this small part of business. And if you think about it for just a second, it's kind of obvious that business and society relies entirely on our planet and on people. But it's not how we all think, right? We've been taught that economy above all, and that's all that really matters. And that's this kind of big aha. And I find myself even kind of 20 years in still finding that to be a shock, right? Because we're just everything you read, everything you see, the story out there is, profits is all that matters, GDP is all that matters for a country. And I'd say over 20 years, I've just gotten more and more aware of that underlying story, the narrative, as people call it, that's told us what success looks like or what happiness looks like, and it's been, so deeply flawed this whole time. And it's had some benefits, but it's also creating the situation we're in now, where we're risking, the well-being of everyone. So we have to change the story, and I think that's kind of my big continued awareness over the years, is just more and more about what's holding us back, right? What are the things we all believe that aren't true, right?
Mm. And I just love being a part of that. And going back to this epic question that I loved so much, it took us really some time to truly think intentionally what type of questions should be designed in this world record. And we've chosen
Mm,
this one simply because, like, to me, it elevates me. It amplifies, the entire thinking, and I see we rather than I suddenly. And I thought that this question can raise awareness far more than any other ones. But Andrew, speaking about the question, how is the world better off because your company is in it? Could you share with us what was the intention
mm.
behind when you guys, sat down? Oh, I don't even know how it was born, but like what?
Yeah.
Yeah, what was the intention?
So, Paul Pullman, my co-author, and I, we spoke weekly or more for, a year and a half, writing the book, and had so much back and forth on the language. I don't remember if there was one moment where that became the question. We define net positive. We leverage some, previous thinking like McDonough and Brongart on circular and on kind of positive, thinking about, instead of reducing the negatives, increasing the positives. We kind of looked at those tools, and it was clear to us that, the problems we're facing are so big, and we've waited so long on some of them, that we do need companies and organizations and institutions to start thinking, how can we regenerate, how can we heal, and create positive impact. But I think in the end, the question was, in a way, was more simple than that. It was, Paul has always said something to the effect of, if you don't have a purpose, what's your purpose? If you don't have a reason for being, why are you here? And I think we just got to this by thinking something very basic, which is, if we want companies and organizations to improve the well-being of all, of everyone that they touch, why did we ever define it not that way, right? Why did we ever define an organization whose goal is to undermine the well-being of some groups to create well-being for others? Think about what we're saying. And it's a little bit of something I've talked about and written about for years, which is, and we mentioned in the book, which is like the reverse goal challenge. Like, if you say we're going to be, half our products will be sustainable by 2030, you're committing to half your products being unsustainable. Um, Again, it comes back to this story. We just have accepted that to have a business means you must be destroying resources. You must be
Mm.
destroying value somewhere for all the value you create. Why? Right? Why do we assume that? So I think there wasn't one key moment, but there was just a sense of, again, like this kind of logic of, if you don't have a purpose and you're not creating well-being for people, why do you exist? What's your reason? So I think it came from a lot of different angles, but just the urgency and the just inherent logic.
I love the way it's layered. I mean, the entire book and that question, it truly awakens, and I can't emphasize the benefits of reading that. And I often wonder as well, when working as a consultant in many companies, like years ago, I had this big inner conflict, understanding that it's not what I want to do because it's not taking neither me, neither humanity forward.
Mm,
And you refer as well to your work as the consultant as well previously. And in many businesses, I ask the question, where do we lie to ourselves? Whether we
mm,
are in the boardroom, whether we are in the meeting with the executives, where it doesn't really matter, it's just maybe a team with clients. And that question as well awakens people. But Andrew, speaking to you, where do you think we still as leaders lie to ourselves. And in a way, we know, like innately, we know that we are ignoring certain truths, but that's just, kind of comfortable because we never
Mm,
had time to sit down and like really
mm,
sit down and answer those, necessary questions.
yeah.
So what are those truths we are kind of ignoring, and yeah, and why?
Yeah. I mean, look, this is hard. There's the kind of old joke about two fish are swimming and an old fish swims by and says, "Oh, how's the water today, boys?" And they keep swimming, and one of the younger fish turns to the other and says, "What's water?" There's a wisdom that comes from asking, what do we take for granted? What have we assumed to be? And I think that's again this idea that there's just one purpose to business, or that shareholder profit is it. There's a simplicity to it. I get why it became so popular. Like, it's easy to think there's sorry, there's the dog. There's a simplicity to it, but it is oversimplified, right? So I think there's a lot of things we take for granted, and one of the themes in the book really throughout is just humanity, and bringing humanity to business. And I think we have to kind of wake up to the fact that every business is an organization of people, right? This is all based on people, and you're producing a product or service for people, and it isn't just this cold enterprise. And I think as leaders, um, you need to embrace, kind of your humanity. People talk about bringing your full self to work. I mean, that might be a little oversimplified, but at the very least, the values you hold in your personal life, the things you believe, you should carry those to business. You shouldn't put them to the side just because you're at work. And I think I've seen so many people where they're on the board of an environmental group in their personal lives, but then at work, no, we can't look at environmental footprint, right? So there's this disconnect, or like there's two halves or something, when we are integrated, as people, and individually, and as people, as a society, we're connected, and it's we shouldn't be leaving one part of the discussion, one part of ourselves at home. So I think challenging that view and kind of having the courage to bring yourself, bring your humanity in, is critical.
I love that, and I can just imagine, how different meetings and collaboration and just the space where we meet would be when we are
Mm,
vulnerable enough to just simply, be there without a need to prove anything to anyone, without a need to, I don't know, to be afraid, to raise those big questions. And as I spoke with so many CEOs in this world record, I always ask the question, what do you think, what does it take to kind of weave both the impact and wealth, or in a way profitability, in every thought, every decision of your
mm,
ecosystem? And to my actually surprise, many said that probably it's not possible, and they still leaned on the profit side, saying that first we have to be profitable, because then only we can think about the
mm.
impact. And that's the tendency which I see, and I wouldn't agree with that. And I really want to hear your thoughts, Andrew, because I believe
Right.
there will be many listening to us, and it's not that those CEOs, they don't want to think about the impact. They truly do. Well, at least that's how it seems, right? But as well, what is holding them back, it is probably not, it's my assumption again, not knowing how to move from that blueprinted profit and then only other
Right.
things, kind of practices. Yeah, how do you see that can be
Well, I mean,
manifesting?
if you kind of brought it into personal terms, if you said that, um, to someone, well, I can't volunteer, I can't do anything in my church. First, I've got to do work. I got to make money for 30 years, and then I can worry about doing any volunteering or any help. I, that's not really how people think, right? They have multiple facets to their lives, and that metaphor is not really perfect, because I'm talking about like literal philanthropy or volunteer work. The difference is in the business thing, in the business environment, sustainability is better business. When someone says that, well, we got to worry about profit first and then this, is because the inherent assumption is that
Mm.
if you're doing anything under the banner of sustainability, it hurts business. That is the base assumption that I've been fighting for 20 years, that you still see. Even with every company talking about it now, a lot, a lot of them and a lot of the executives still think they have to do it because investors are asking or employees are asking, but that it hurts the business. There's just, that's been, again, a story that's been told, right? Um, some of it kind of purposely misleading, right? The fossil fuel industry has told business and society, well, if you go to renewables, it's too expensive. It won't support you. It's not good for business. I mean, there's always been a series of stories to keep change from happening, and I think it's the same with a lot of dimensions of sustainability. You just hear this: we can't afford it. I'll still hear that about renewables, and renewables are just cheaper now. So this again, these stories linger, and they last much longer than they should. So look, we have to challenge the normal story. We have to challenge the way we think business should be run, and just fully understand that at the macro biggest level, society and business isn't going to thrive unless society's thriving, unless the planet's thriving. But even at the business level, you're not going to have a very good long term view and prospects if you're not managing your stakeholders, if you're not managing your environmental and social impacts. You have to. And so again, we have to take it out of this discussion that it always hurts business. We have to challenge that at every step.
Mm. And one of the reasons we are curating this world record is that it's my personal why. I truly want to go far beyond and understand what new type of practices, rituals, thinking, disciplines we can create and embed. I mean, we in co-creation with
Mm,
everyone who is participating, that is not yet written, that is not yet kind of been described in a linear, mechanical, top down kind of approach. And I wonder as well, what type of rituals should be completely redefined
mm,
when we want to rewrite that story. And I'm simply thinking of a CEO or a business owner of, it can be 500 people, it can be 5,000 people, it can be even smaller company, but he truly or she wants to take the company and himself herself farm, become like a different person, but
mm,
they don't know like where to start from. Because normally I know that many companies, they, what do? They do yearly strategic sessions, or review every quarter. They do it in a closed room, not surrounded by a wider ecosystem, and it's just the same kind of thing, but maybe, yeah, putting more words as slogans. But Andrew, what would you see different in the business rituals if there is
mm,
a leader who wants to become a different person and truly see we instead of I?
mm. Well, you said it, that you started with becoming a different person. That's kind of core to our view on net positive, that the first chapter on the steps to build this kind of business is the chapter called how much do you care, right? You start with yourself, and as leaders, what do I care about? Do I care about my employees or about the problems of the world? Do I care that the climate is becoming so dangerous for humanity? Do I care about human rights issues? And most people do, right? They do want to do the right thing. So I think it is starting with yourself, um, and just learning what's going on, just understanding these problems, just for themselves, without saying it at first, what does this do for the business or how does it affect our business? Just understanding what's really going on in the world, the real data, the real information. I think there's a lot of personal rituals that leaders can take on. I am a fan of mindfulness and meditation, and it's certainly come into business and schools and things so much more in recent years. If for no other reason that it gives you a method, a tool to pause or to see connections, just to take that literal breath or figurative moment before responding to something, that I think helps you connect and helps you understand the world and your place in it better. The other, I guess you could call it ritual, I think, especially for people at the top, the real leaders of organizations, is just getting in the habit and the practice of of listening more, bringing in NGOs that are critical and listening to them, bringing in younger employees in particular. Go talk to some 25-year-olds in your company and hear how they talk about climate, right? Or inequality or LGBTQ plus rights and gender. It's really different. And I think if you want to understand where your workforce is going and where the customer base is going, you got to go listen. So I think those are the two of the things that are important, which is kind of looking inward and then looking outward and getting views from outside your normal domain.
Mhm. And when I read the book as well, what I loved it was that normally we always speak in the business, we are looking too narrow, let's look outside in and all that stuff.
Mm,
But but the way you guys are reflecting in the book, it is that first it is inward, and it's
mm,
only then when we have, a strong kind of sense of duty and calling and have that oneness, feeling oneness with that, we are strong enough, vulnerable enough, brave enough to kind of, project that outside in, as I would say.
yeah.
And Andrew, the last question would be, how do you see the world 100 years from now?
That's a long time, 100 years. I mean, think about what was true 100 years ago. It's funny how, there's some things that haven't changed that much. Planes, cars aren't, yeah, they're EVs, but they're four wheels that get you around. There's some things that are very, very similar. Um, I think what's always really hard to predict to some extent is the cultural stuff. If you look at predictions people made in the 50s, there's so many that might have been right on technology, like picturing video phones and things like that. But usually the predictions still had like men and women in traditional roles. Even when the predictions were there, or if you read a sci-fi book that I'm reading one now that was written in like the 70s or 80s, that it's so thoughtful about technology. It's pretty smart, but then the dynamics in the book with the women are the assistants. Like it's just so dated socially. So I think in 100 years there's stuff technologically we can predict. The world will be on a clean grid. We'll be getting around with EVs or public transportation or AI driven vehicles. I mean, all that's happening. It's happening really quickly. So that I think we know. The unknowns are, what does society look like? What countries are really powerful? How has the change in kind of gender identity and social norms affected the world? What does it look like then? I don't know. I think it's hard to say. I do hope that there's just much more sense of connection and acceptance of everyone. And we're going to need that because there's going to be damage from this era of humanity. In 100 years, we're still going to probably be dealing with some sea level rise and the temperatures and weather. And so I'd like to think we'll have come together in a different way, with far fewer rivalries, across the world to manage these issues and really help each other, because there will be big migrations over the next 100 years and just enormous social changes. And I think that's where we need to develop the muscle, the skill to manage. So
Mhm.
who
Couple of
knows?
things.
Who knows? And of course, AI will probably be in control long before 100 years from now. So maybe AI will decide what happens to us.
Yeah, we together will with II, so in collaboration. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for being here with us. It was a pleasure having you today.
To be here. Thanks for doing this.